Imagine a world where America never rose. No Hollywood, no Wall Street, no Silicon Valley, no blue passports at open borders, no military might capable of changing the course of global events. It's hard to picture today, but not long ago, the United States was a fragile experiment, a republic without colonies, power, or influence. Today, it has over 800 military bases in 70-plus countries. Its currency is the backbone of global finance. Its culture and policies ripple through every continent. So how did this transformation happen? What turned a breakaway colony into the world's most powerful nation? To understand America's rise, we need to go back, not just to the wars it fought, but to the ideas it carried, the lands it claimed, and the contradictions it lived with. Because the story of how America became a superpower begins not in its triumphs, but in its uncertainties. In 1776, 13 colonies declared independence from the British Empire, one of the most powerful entities of its time. The odds were slim. The revolution was bold. The republic that emerged was small, agrarian, and vulnerable. Surrounded by European powers and indigenous nations, early America faced a fight for survival and for territory. What followed was an unrelenting push westward, a campaign framed as manifest destiny. The belief that the U.S. was destined to expand across the North American continent became central to its identity. By the 1840s, this ideology was more than rhetoric, it was a mission. The Louisiana Purchase doubled the young nation's size in 1803. The annexation of Texas and victory in the Mexican-American War brought California, Arizona, New Mexico, and more into the fold. Railroads stitched these territories together, but this expansion came at a devastating cost. Indigenous peoples were displaced, marginalized, and massacred. Tribes that had lived on the land for centuries were uprooted. Meanwhile, the expansion of slavery into new territories sparked fierce national debates, culminating in the Civil War, the bloodiest conflict in American history. Even after the Union was preserved in 1865, the question remained, should America look outward? Should a country born in rebellion against empire now seek to become one? Enter William Seward, Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of State and one of the earliest visionaries of American global expansion. In 1867, he orchestrated the purchase of Alaska from Russia, a move mocked at the time as Seward's folly. But Seward had grander ambitions. He pushed for the acquisition of Greenland, Iceland, and strategic islands in the Caribbean. He believed that America's destiny didn't end at the Pacific or Atlantic. It extended across oceans. But not everyone agreed. Many in Congress resisted. Anti-imperialist sentiment ran deep. Some feared the political consequences of ruling over non-white populations. Others worried that foreign entanglements would undermine the Republic's values. The debate over America's future, continental power or global empire, remained unresolved through the 19th century. Yet while politicians debated, industry transformed the nation. By the 1870s, the Industrial Revolution had taken root. Steam engines, mechanized factories, and telegraphs changed everything. American cities boomed. Railroads connected coast to coast. Iron and steel flowed from Pittsburgh. Cotton and tobacco poured from the South. Oil erupted in Pennsylvania. With growth came excess, more goods than domestic markets could consume. Manufacturers and bankers began looking outward. They saw opportunity in foreign markets and raw materials abroad. They lobbied Washington for policies that would protect U.S. interests overseas. And with this shift, the foundation was laid. America's rise from revolution was nearly complete. What came next was a decisive pivot. The moment when the United States would no longer just expand, it would project power. But power created appetite. The American government, once reluctant to involve itself in foreign affairs, now saw commerce, security, and diplomacy as tightly linked. The modernization of the U.S. Navy, inspired by Alfred Thayer Mahan's influential book, The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, reflected this shift. Battleships and cruisers were built to protect sea lanes and project American power. By the 1890s, the U.S. was ready to flex its muscles. The tipping point came in 1898, the Spanish-American War. Fueled by sensationalist newspapers and cries to avenge the USS Maine, President William McKinley asked Congress for war with Spain over its brutal rule in Cuba. Congress agreed. Within months, the U.S. destroyed Spanish fleets in both the Caribbean and the Pacific. The victory came with spoils: Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. Territories thousands of miles from American shores. Hawaii, which had already seen rising American influence, was annexed shortly afterward. Then came Wake Island, American Samoa, and control of the Panama Canal Zone. By 1917, the U.S. had also purchased the Virgin Islands from Denmark. In less than 2 decades, America had stitched together an empire that spanned the Pacific and Atlantic. It had become a global power not just economically, but territorially. This new role required new doctrines. President Theodore Roosevelt declared that the U.S. had the right to intervene in Latin American nations to stabilize their economies and governments, an extension of the Monroe Doctrine known as the Roosevelt Corollary. American Marines landed in Nicaragua, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic. In Asia, the U.S. joined major powers in asserting influence over China through the open door policy. Washington became a key player in international diplomacy, arbitrating disputes and shaping trade. But with new power came new dilemmas. Governing overseas territories brought moral and political questions. Should colonial subjects have the same rights as citizens? What role should race play in American expansion? For many Americans, imperialism clashed with national ideals. Anti-imperialist leagues formed, writers and politicians warned of the dangers of overreach. Still, the direction was set. America had entered the global stage, not quietly, but with force. The world would never see it the same way again. The early 20th century began with America sitting confidently on the global stage. But the true test of its power came with a war so vast it shook civilization itself. World War I erupted in 1914, a brutal contest of empires, fought in trenches, with new technologies like tanks, machine guns, and poison gas. Initially, the United States stood apart, watching from across the Atlantic. President Woodrow Wilson urged neutrality, a position popular with the public and essential for business. Yet neutrality could not last. German U-boat attacks on American shipping, coupled with the infamous Zimmermann telegram, a German proposal to Mexico to wage war on the U.S., pushed America into the conflict. In April 1917, the U.S. declared war. America's entry brought fresh troops, massive supplies, and a morale boost to the weary Allies. The tide turned. In just over a year, the war was over. At the Paris Peace Conference in 1919, Wilson arrived not just as a victor, but as a visionary. He proposed the League of Nations, a bold plan to ensure peace through collective security and diplomacy. It was the most ambitious foreign policy initiative in U.S. history. Yet back home, isolationism roared back to life. The Senate rejected joining the League, fearing entanglements in European conflicts. America had helped win the war, but turned away from shaping the peace. In the 1920s and 30s, the U.S. retreated into itself. Prosperity boomed, then crashed with the Great Depression. Overseas, authoritarian regimes rose: Mussolini in Italy, Hitler in Germany, and militarists in Japan. America watched, wary. But its global reach couldn't be undone. Japan's aggression in Asia, particularly its invasion of China, threatened U.S. interests in the Pacific. Still, few imagined war was coming. That changed on December 7, 1941. Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor killed over 2,400 Americans and crippled the Pacific Fleet. Isolationism died that day. War was declared. World War II was unlike any conflict before. It was global, total. And America, now fully mobilized, became its industrial heart. Factories retooled overnight. Women joined the workforce in unprecedented numbers. War bonds and propaganda fueled unity. The U.S. produced tanks, ships, and planes at a pace no enemy could match. By 1945, with Germany defeated and Japan devastated by atomic bombs, the United States stood alone, unscathed at home, armed with unmatched economic and military power. The war had transformed America from a regional power into the anchor of the free world. But peace would present a new challenge, one even more complex than victory.
President Harry Truman has announced the end of the war. The victory has been won. It's official from the White House, Japan.
The end of World War II didn't bring global peace. It redrew the map of power. Two giants emerged, the United States and the Soviet Union. Allies in war, adversaries in peace. The world became bipolar, split between American capitalism and Soviet communism. America had unique advantages. Its homeland was untouched by war, its industries thrived, it held 2/3 of the world's gold reserves, and possessed the atomic bomb. With Europe and Asia in ruins, the United States stepped into a leadership role unlike any in modern history. Washington moved swiftly. The 1944 Bretton Woods Conference had already established the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency. The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, born from that agreement, were based in Washington and dominated by American leadership. The U.S. economy was now the engine of global recovery. In 1945, the United Nations was created to prevent another global war. Though international in scope, it leaned heavily on U.S. support and vision. America hoped to build a liberal world order, grounded in trade, diplomacy, and multilateral cooperation. But that vision clashed with a new threat. The Soviet Union moved aggressively, establishing control over Eastern Europe and exporting communism globally. In response, the U.S. adopted the Truman Doctrine in 1947, pledging support to any nation resisting communist subjugation. That same year, the Marshall Plan launched, funneling billions into Western Europe's recovery. It was both humanitarian aid and a firewall against communism. To deter Soviet aggression, NATO was formed in 1949, the first peacetime military alliance in U.S. history. Meanwhile, American troops remained stationed across Europe and Asia. Bases in Germany, Japan, and South Korea became permanent fixtures of U.S. influence. The Cold War wasn't just military, it was ideological. In Asia, America defended South Korea in a brutal war. In Latin America and Africa, it backed anti-communist regimes, regardless of their democratic credentials. In Cuba, the U.S. tried and failed to overthrow Fidel Castro. In Vietnam, it fought a long, bloody conflict to stop communist expansion, with devastating consequences. The Cold War also fueled scientific rivalry. The Soviets launched Sputnik in 1957. America responded with NASA, the space race, and a renewed push in science and education. At the same time, both superpowers amassed nuclear arsenals, locked in a dangerous balance of terror called mutually assured destruction. At home, anti-communist hysteria peaked during the McCarthy era, yet Cold War pressure also exposed America's contradictions. The civil rights movement gained momentum, and leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. framed equality as essential to global credibility.
In the 1980s, President Ronald Reagan ramped up Cold War tensions, increasing military spending and challenging Soviet influence. But change was coming. Economic stagnation and political pressure weakened the USSR. By 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. The Cold War was over. And for the first time in history, one country, the United States, stood unchallenged atop the global stage. With the Soviet Union gone, the 1990s ushered in a new era, one where the United States stood alone. No rival, just one superpower at the helm of global affairs. President George H.W. Bush envisioned a new world order, cooperative diplomacy backed by unmatched military power. This vision was tested during the 1991 Gulf War, where the U.S. led a coalition to drive Iraq out of Kuwait. The swift victory cemented America's role as global enforcer. President Bill Clinton embraced globalization. He expanded NATO, supported free trade, and positioned the U.S. as the world's economic and cultural anchor. Hollywood, the internet, fast food, American influence was everywhere. Still, limits emerged. Peacekeeping missions in Somalia and Haiti faltered. The Rwandan genocide went unanswered. Even as the U.S. expanded its reach, questions about its commitment and capacity grew. Then came 9/11. The deadliest terrorist attack on U.S. soil reshaped everything. America launched the War on Terror, invading Afghanistan and Iraq. The conflicts toppled regimes but led to prolonged wars and global criticism. Domestically, surveillance and polarization intensified. Internationally, America's image was bruised. The Iraq War in particular drew sharp rebuke, launched without broad support and based on flawed intelligence. Yet American innovation surged. Tech giants like Apple, Google, and Amazon changed the world. The U.S. economy rebounded, and American universities and research continued to lead. Challenges, however, multiplied. The 2008 financial crisis shook confidence. The rise of China introduced a new competitor. And internal divisions, political, economic, cultural, widened. In 2016, Donald Trump's America First doctrine marked a sharp pivot. Long-standing alliances were questioned. International deals were abandoned. Global leadership gave way to national interest. Today, America remains powerful, its military unmatched, its economy vast. But its role is shifting. Will it continue leading or retreat into itself? One thing is clear. America didn't just rise to power, it shaped the world. And whether it leads the next chapter is a question only time will answer. Thanks for watching Top Fact. If you found this journey enlightening, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell because the story of power, history, and nations is far from over.